He treats me better than you ever did, she said before walking out and blocking me everywhere. I didn't chase or respond. Months later, she sent me a long message apologizing right after his engagement photos with another woman started circulating online everywhere. He treats me better than you ever did. She said it like she'd been rehearsing it in the mirror every morning for weeks. Not screaming it, not crying it, just stating it, flat and certain, the way you read an address off a piece of paper. 7 words. And the way they landed wasn't like a punch. It was more like watching the floor crack slowly under your feet and understanding, not in panic, but in quiet, horrible clarity, that it was going to give way. I didn't say anything. Not because she destroyed me. Not because I had nothing to say. But because something deeper than words, something instinctual, understood that whatever I said next would define how this ended. And I refused to end it begging. She stood near the door, already dressed, already decided. The kind of stillness she had in that moment wasn't grief. It was relief. And that was the thing that cut the deepest. Not the words, the relief behind them. What I didn't know yet, standing in that hallway with my coffee going cold in my hand, was that those 7 words would eventually come full circle. That the story she walked into when she walked away from me would collapse. That she would come back, not to try again, but to apologize. And that by then, I would have already become someone she wouldn't recognize. 3 years. Let that sit for a second. 3 years of building something with another person, and I don't mean romantically, I mean structurally. The way you know their coffee order without asking. The way you split the grocery list without needing to discuss it. The way you can sit in a car for 2 hours in complete silence, and it doesn't feel like distance. It feels like comfort. That's what 3 years looks like when it's real. And it had been real. At least for a long time. At least on my side. She was the person I'd made plans around. Not marriage proposals and grand gestures. Just the small architectural decisions you make when someone is load-bearing in your life. The weekend plans you think about in terms of we. The future that, when you imagined it, had another person's outline somewhere in it. You don't realize how much space someone occupies until they pack that space into a suitcase and carry it out the door. The weight of it hit me later. Not that morning. That morning I was just numb. But I could feel something irreversible in the air, the way you feel a weather shift. Something that once broken couldn't be rebuilt exactly as it was. I didn't realize it then. But that moment, her hand on the door handle, her bag already over her shoulder, changed everything. Not in the direction she intended, but in a direction nonetheless. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 27. She was 26. We'd been together since we were both wrapping up the loose ends of our early 20s, degrees, cheap apartments, figuring out who we were outside of school. Her name was Claire. We met at a mutual friend's birthday gathering. She'd laughed at something I said. I'd made her laugh again on purpose after that. And somewhere in that exchange we both decided to keep the conversation going. 3 years, one shared apartment, and a tabby cat named Biscuit who had claimed full ownership of the couch within his first week of living with us. That was the shape of our life. Ordinary, in the best way, until it wasn't. You never notice the drift while it's happening. That's the thing no one warns you about. You don't wake up one morning to a relationship that's fallen apart. You wake up to a relationship that's been quietly, incrementally rearranging itself for months, and one day you turn around and nothing is where you left it. The first sign appeared in February. I'd come home to a cold apartment and a cold dinner. I'd cooked pasta, her favorite, and she'd walked in almost 2 hours late without a call, without a text, without even the small courtesy of a running behind. She was laughing at her phone when the door opened. She looked up, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw something cross her face. Not guilt. Not yet. Just surprise. Like she'd walked into the wrong room. Sorry, lost track of time, she said. She sat down, took 2 bites of the pasta, said she wasn't very hungry, pulled out her phone. I stood at the sink afterward and let the water run over my hands and thought, something is wrong. Not screaming, not certain, not even fully formed. Just a whisper. Something is wrong. But I turned off the tap, dried my hands, went to bed. I told myself I was overthinking it, that she was just having one of those days, distracted, tired, stretched between too many things. That was the first choice I made that I'd come to regret. Not making a scene, not demanding an explanation, just filing it away. And the file got thicker over the months that followed. March came, and with it came a name. Qley. She dropped it casually, The way you mention a coworker whose name you've heard a few times but don't really think about. Cole was hilarious at the team lunch today. Cole knows this great coffee place near the office. Cole recommended this podcast. I think you'd actually like it. At first, I registered it the way you register background noise. Coworkers. Normal. Everyone has them. But the mentions didn't plateau. They increased. And they changed in texture. Somehow. They went from Cole at work said to Cole thinks to just Cole as a full character in the story she brought home. I noticed. I didn't say it. I wanted to believe I was being paranoid. I chose the paranoid explanation over the obvious one because the obvious one was harder to look at. That's a very human thing to do. And a very costly one. April. She came home on a Friday evening, and she was different. Not in appearance, same clothes, same hair. Different in energy. There was this lightness in her that I hadn't seen around me in months. The kind of lightness that belongs to people who are looking forward to something. She was animated, talking faster than usual, laughing easily at small things. And I remember sitting across from her at dinner and thinking, she looks exactly the way she looked when we first started dating. That version of her. The one that was always a little breathless, always a little lit up from the inside. And the thought that followed, the one I didn't say out loud, was this. She doesn't look like that around me anymore. That was the clearest signal I'd had so far. And I buried it so quickly that by the next morning, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. May brought a weekend trip. Work retreat, she said. Team building, she said. I had no reason not to believe her. I helped her pack. She kissed me on the cheek when she left, not the mouth, I noticed, the cheek, a small geography of distance, and said she'd be back Sunday. She came back Sunday evening, quieter than she'd left. And here's the thing about quiet. There are different kinds. There's the quiet of contentment, the quiet of exhaustion, and then there's the quiet of someone carrying something they haven't decided what to do with yet. That Sunday night, she carried the third kind through the door. How was the trip? I asked. Good. Long. I'm just really tired. She went straight to the bedroom. I sat on the couch for a long time. Biscuit jumped into my lap. I stared at the door she'd closed. And I thought, something happened on that trip. I don't know what, but something happened. I almost said it. I was right there at the edge of the conversation, hand on the door, ready to knock, ready to ask. And then I didn't, because I was afraid of the answer. And fear is a very effective silencer. June. The pretending stopped. Not dramatically, not in a single moment, but like a light that flickers before it goes out. The effort just gradually disappeared. She stopped texting during the day, not once in a while. Entirely. She stopped asking about my work, which she'd always done. She'd always been the person who remembered the small details, the annoying client, the difficult project, the things I was nervous about. That stopped. She stopped suggesting things for weekends. Stopped initiating touch. Stopped being, in any way that I could point to, present. It was like living with the outline of someone. The shape was there. The substance had gone somewhere else. One Wednesday evening, I finally put my fork down at dinner. She was scrolling her phone. Her food was getting cold. Claire. She looked up. Can we talk? A small pause. She set the phone down. About what? About us. About whatever is happening between us. Because something is happening and I can feel it, and I'd rather we actually talk about it than keep doing this, whatever this is. She looked at me for a long moment. Those eyes I'd looked into thousands of times. And then she said, "You're overthinking again." That was her entire answer. You're overthinking. Not, I hear you. Not, you're right. I've been distant, let me explain. Not even the honesty of, I don't want to talk about it right now. Just a gentle redirect. A dismissal wrapped in reassurance. Like I was a nervous child being told there were no monsters under the bed. I let it go. Cleared the plates. Didn't push. And somewhere in that silence, I think she understood that she could keep going. That I would keep waiting. That I would interpret her exits as introversion rather than as what they were. July brought her cousin's wedding. And for about 6 hours, just 6 hours, we were almost ourselves again. Getting dressed together, her laughing about my tie, me telling her she looked incredible, and meaning it completely. The reception was at a venue with a courtyard and fairy lights and a band that played old songs, and we danced twice, and she had her head against my shoulder, and I remember thinking, we're still here. Whatever has been happening, we are still here. The drive home undid all of it. Her phone lit up. She read the screen. She smiled. Not at me. At whatever that screen said. That private smile. The one that exists in its own world, that has nothing to do with anyone else in the room. Or the car. I'd seen that smile on other people's faces before. I'd read about it in other people's stories. I'd never thought I'd be the person sitting next to it, invisible. I didn't ask. I just drove. And the silence between us on that highway, not the comfortable kind, not our kind, was the loudest thing I'd heard in months. August. The apartment felt different. Smaller, somehow. Like the walls had been quietly rearranging themselves, moving in, taking up space that used to feel like shared air. She was homeless. When she was home, she was unreachable in every way that mattered. We hadn't been close in almost 7 weeks. Not in the physical sense, just the closeness in general. The reaching across in the dark. The finding of each other. All of it had stopped. One night in the middle of August, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe beside me, and I asked myself, am I imagining this? I started making a list in my head. Not of her wrongs, of my failures. Had I stopped being interesting? Had I let the relationship become too routine without bringing enough life into it? Had I been so focused on stability that I'd confused it with stagnation? I genuinely asked myself these things. Because when you love someone and things start going wrong, the first instinct isn't to blame them. The first instinct, if you're an honest person, is to look at yourself. I looked at myself hard that August. And what I found was, yes, I could have done more. I could have been more deliberate, more thoughtful about making sure the everyday didn't consume the extraordinary. But I also knew, sitting with myself in the quiet, that I had loved her genuinely, that I had shown up, that the consistent, present, real version of myself that I'd given her was not nothing. It was, in fact, a great deal. And she was throwing it into a comparison with someone she'd known for months. Someone she knew at his most curated, his most intentional, his beginning. Then came the end of August. And this is where everything cracked open. I came home early on a Thursday. Half day. Nothing dramatic. Just wrapped up before 5 and thought I'd cook dinner for once. Do something different. I put my keys on the counter and heard her voice from the bedroom. Laughing. That specific, deep, fully released laugh. The kind you only hear when someone's guard is completely down. The kind I used to be the reason for. I pushed the door open. She was lying on the bed, phone pressed to her ear. And when she saw me, the laugh cut off like a switch had been flipped. Silence. I'll call you back, she said quietly into the phone. Hung up. Looked at me. I didn't know you'd be home early. Clearly, I said. A beat of silence stretched between us. Who was that? She paused. Just long enough. Just a friend. There it was. Just a friend. The oldest line in this entire script. The one that's never actually just that simple. I looked at her for a long moment. I wasn't angry in that instant. I was something worse. I was tired. The kind of tired that sits deep in the bones. I'm not going to accuse you of anything, I said. But I need you to be honest with me. Because I've been watching something happen for months, and I've been telling myself I'm wrong. And I'm not sure I am anymore. And I think after 3 years, I deserve a real conversation. She sat up on the edge of the bed. Something moved across her face. For one moment, one genuine, unguarded moment, I thought she was going to tell me everything. Her eyes went somewhere complicated, like she was standing at a fork in a road. And then she stepped back. You're reading into nothing, she said. Not unkindly, just firmly. Closed. I nodded, went to the kitchen, started cooking. Neither of us spoke through dinner. Afterward, she did the dishes, which she never did, and I thought maybe it was a gesture, an apology without words. But nothing else was said. And that night, lying in the dark, I made a decision. Not to leave. Not yet. Not to accuse or confront or demand. But to stop. Stop reaching. Stop initiating. Stop being the person who was pulling the weight of a relationship for two. I was going to give her the space she was clearly creating, and I was going to see what she did with it. September came, and I stepped back. Completely. Quietly. Without announcement. I stopped texting her during the day because I'd been the one doing almost all of it. I stopped suggesting things for weekends. I stopped asking how she was, how her day was, whether she'd eaten lunch. I stopped being the one who reached. And something strange and clarifying happened. She didn't reach back. Not even once. In the silence I created, she accelerated. Stayed out later. Was more frequently with friends from work. Was more openly on her phone when we were in the same room. Not hiding it the way she had before, but almost openly absent behind it. Like my withdrawal had removed the last reason she had to pretend. I watched it happen and I felt two things simultaneously. Sadness and relief. Sadness because the relationship I'd put 3 years into was clearly over. It had been over for a while. Relief because at least now I could see it clearly. No more fog. No more second-guessing my own instincts. The shape of what had been happening was visible, and I could finally start deciding what to do with it. Then, 2 weeks into September, she came home and stood in the kitchen doorway and said she needed to figure some things out. She didn't say what things. She didn't say who was involved in the figuring. I said, okay. She looked at me like she'd expected more. Are we okay? She asked. I held her gaze. I honestly don't know, I said. She nodded, went to the bedroom, and I sat in the kitchen with Biscuit on the counter beside me, and I thought, this is almost over. Not with panic, not with desperation, just recognition. It was a Saturday morning. The kind of Saturday that looks like a good day from the outside. Sunlight through the curtains, air that smells like autumn coming in, the kind of morning that should feel easy. I was making coffee when she walked out of the bedroom, already dressed, jacket on, bag over her shoulder. I registered the suitcase by the door a half-second later. Already packed, already waiting. I set the coffee pot down. I turned around and looked at her, and I knew. I didn't need the words. So this is it, I said. She didn't deny it. She didn't look away either. I think we've been over for a while, she said. I just haven't been honest about it. With you or with myself. I gave her that, the honesty of it. She wasn't lying in that part. Why now? I asked. Not desperately. Just needing to understand the timing. She hesitated. Her jaw moved slightly, like she was working something out. And then she said it. He treats me better than you ever did. 7 words. And I stood there and I let them land. I let myself feel them fully. Not push them away, not argue them down. Just feel the complete weight of what she'd chosen to say and how she'd chosen to say it. Not in anger, not in grief. In the voice of someone who had made peace with a decision. The voice of someone crossing a finish line. I noticed my hands were very still. The coffee was there. The morning was there. The sunlight through the curtains was there. And none of it felt real for about 10 seconds. And then it did. It all felt very, very real. I didn't respond. I want to be honest about why. Not because I was shocked into silence. Not because the words had hollowed me out. But because I understood, in a very calm, clear part of myself, that there was nothing I could say that would matter. She had not arrived at this moment looking for a conversation. She had arrived at this moment having already written the ending. Anything I said would become part of a story she'd tell later. Either the desperate ex who couldn't let go, or the cold one who didn't even fight. I wasn't going to be either. So I said nothing. I turned back to the counter, picked up my coffee, looked out the window at the morning. She waited, probably for 30 seconds, which is a long time to stand in a doorway waiting for a reaction you're not going to get. Then I heard her pick up the suitcase. And then the click of the door. Quiet. Final. Not a slam. Just a closure. And then my phone started vibrating. Instagram notification. She'd removed me. Then WhatsApp. Then the contact on my phone. Blocked. Systematic. Deliberate. Like she'd had a checklist. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after that. The coffee went cold in my hands. Biscuit appeared from wherever he'd been sleeping, jumped up on the counter, and headbutted my arm. I scratched behind his ears. Just you and me? I said. He blinked at me. I think that was the most comforting interaction I had that entire day. Here is what I did not do. I did not call from another number. I did not drive past her office. I did not show up at places she might be. I did not contact her friends for information. I did not post anything. Not a sad song lyric. Not a vague status. Not a photo designed to say, look how fine I am. I did not reach out to mutual acquaintances to ask what she was saying about me. I did not break. I didn't chase. And I want to be honest about what that cost me. Because there's a version of this story where I tell you I was immediately okay. That I woke up the next morning free and light and unburdened. That's not what happened. What happened was slower. Darker in some moments. More honest. The first week was the worst. Not because I was falling apart, but because there was this strange, echoey quality to everything. The apartment was quieter. Her presence had occupied a certain amount of space. Not loudly, but constantly. And now that space was just air. I kept almost texting her things. Not to beg or argue. Just the small reflexive text that 3 years of habit builds. Biscuit knocked over the whole water bowl. He looks very surprised. That show we were watching has a new episode. Traffic is unbelievable today. The kind of nothing texts that are actually the texture of intimacy. I had to actively stop myself from sending them. Not because of pride. Because she'd blocked me everywhere. That was a reminder that cut differently every time. It wasn't just that she'd left. It was that she'd left in a way that closed the door and removed the handle from the inside. I spent a fair amount of that first week sitting with that. But I had made a decision. No chasing. Not as a strategy. Not as a power play. But as a refusal. A refusal to perform grief for someone who had left. A refusal to confirm a story, his treatments versus mine, that was built to justify an exit, not to tell the truth. I would not give her the image of me undone. Because I wasn't. Not fully. I was hurt. I was grieving something real. But I was not undone. And I knew, the way you know your own center when things shake around it, that I was going to be okay. So I started doing the things that make you okay. October. I repainted the living room. It took 2 full weekends. My shoulders ached for a week afterward. There was pain in my hair that I didn't notice until my reflection caught it 3 days later. But when I stood back and looked at it, at the wall that was now mine, just mine, chosen by me without committee, something settled. I rearranged the furniture. I donated the things that had been hers that she hadn't taken, not vindicatively, just clearing space. I took Biscuit for his overdue vet appointment, and the vet said he was in excellent health and entirely too confident about it. I called Ben, who'd been a close friend since our early 20s and who I'd let drift during the relationship, the way you do when a relationship becomes the sun in your solar system. And we went for dinner. He asked about Claire. I told him simply that we'd split up. He didn't press. He just said, "Man, I'm sorry. You doing all right?" "Getting there," I said, and I meant it without exaggeration. I was genuinely getting there. Not there, but moving. I started running again that October. Early mornings, before the city fully woke up, before the first coffee shops opened, and before the traffic built, and before the day started demanding things of me. Just headphones and pavement and the rhythm of effort. There's something about running that's impossible to fake. You can't shortcut it. You can't convince yourself you're further along than you are. Your body tells you exactly where you stand, honest in a way that the rest of life rarely is. On the days I wanted to quit at the 2-mile mark, I didn't quit. Not out of stubbornness, but because I'd made an agreement with myself that season, to not abandon things I'd started, to stop quietly giving up in the middle and calling it patience. That discipline, applied first to running and then to everything else, changed something structural in me. I was sleeping better, eating properly, finishing things I started. Small things. But the small things are, it turns out, the whole architecture. You don't rebuild yourself in a single moment of revelation. You rebuild in 100 tiny decisions. In getting up when you don't feel like it. In cooking instead of ordering. In calling the friend you've let drift. In sitting with a hard feeling for 10 minutes instead of picking up your phone to escape it. That's the work. Unglamorous. Unremarkable. Entirely necessary. Some nights were still hard. I want to be honest about that too. There was a Thursday in late October when I drove past the restaurant we used to go on Saturday nights. The corner booth place with the good wine list and the waiter who always remembered our usual order, and something hit me. Not grief, exactly. More like phantom pain. The ache in a place that used to hold something. I sat in my car outside for about 10 minutes. Didn't cry. Didn't call anyone. Just sat with it. Let it move through. Then drove home. That's what healing actually looks like. Not one dramatic turning point. Not a montage. Just a series of 10-minute moments in parking lots where you feel the thing, and then you let it go, and then you keep going. November. The frequency of thinking about her dropped. That was the first marker I paid attention to. It went from every day to every few days. Then less. I was rebuilding a version of myself that wasn't organized around another person. And in doing that, I started to see things I hadn't been able to see clearly while I was in the middle of the relationship. Not just about her. About me. About the way I'd stayed quiet when I should have spoken. The way I'd filed away instincts because I was afraid of what they meant. The way I'd turned my perception off in order to keep the peace. I had participated in my own confusion. And I promised myself, not dramatically, not in a journal or a letter or out loud, just quietly, as a decision, that I wouldn't do that again. And here is where I need to stop and tell you something. Something I held back earlier. Not to manipulate the story, but because this is the order in which I understood it. And sequence matters. Claire had a pattern. I didn't see it clearly from inside the relationship. But looking back from the outside, it's stark and unmistakable. When we first met, she was coming out of a 2-year relationship. She told me about it early on. Her ex had been, in her words, emotionally unavailable. Detached. Present in body, absent in investment. I had listened and thought, I understand. I'll be different. And I was. I was present. I was invested. I showed up in the ways that matter, the ordinary daily ways. But here's what I didn't understand then. Claire had a very specific, very private relationship with beginnings. She lit up at the start of things. The newness. The discovery. The electric-charged feeling of someone who doesn't yet know your worst habits and most difficult days. That feeling of being looked at through fresh eyes. She needed it more than most people do. And the thing is, she wasn't wrong to want that. That feeling is wonderful. The problem was that she'd never fully made peace with what comes after it. After the beginning, there's real life. Work and laundry and arguments about nothing in days when neither of you is at your best, and the whole project of being with another person stops feeling like a discovery and starts feeling like a daily choice. That daily choice is where love actually lives. But for Claire, that transition had always read as loss. She described her ex, the unavailable one, in terms that, hearing them now, sounded more like someone who had simply passed the honeymoon phase, who had gotten comfortable, who had stopped performing and started just being. She'd experienced that as rejection. And with me, the same thing had happened. I had gotten real. Not checked out. Not cold. Not neglectful. Just real. And real, for her, had a familiar shape. And Cole had arrived at exactly the moment I was at my most real, my most routine, my most familiar. And he was at his most new, his most deliberate, his most performed. And she'd stood at that intersection and made the comparison she was always going to make. New and electric versus familiar and real. And new won. Not because it was actually better, because it was newer. I'm not saying this to excuse her, or myself. I'm saying it because it reframes everything. The exit line she chose, "He treats me better than you ever did," was not an honest assessment. It was a comparison built on a lie of context. She was comparing his best to my most ordinary, his highlight reel to my unedited footage. And she dressed that unfair comparison up as a verdict on my worth. That's not fair. That's not even close to fair. But it is, painfully, completely, humanly, understandable. December. About 3 months after she'd left. I was at Ben's apartment on a Friday evening. His girlfriend had cooked, and there were a few friends around. The comfortable, low-key kind of night that had become genuinely restorative for me. His girlfriend, who is a warm and well-meaning person, mentioned something mid-conversation. "Oh, did you see about that Cole guy? From Claire's work." Ben's expression shifted quickly. She caught it immediately, looked at me. "Sorry, I shouldn't have." "It's fine," I said. "What about him?" She hesitated. "Then, he just got engaged. Someone posted the photos. Apparently, it's someone he'd been with before. They made it official." I sat with that information for a moment. The math was immediate. Claire had left me for Cole in September. It was December. 3 months. And Cole was engaged. Not to Claire. To someone else. Someone he'd apparently been with before. I didn't ask for more details. I didn't need them. The picture assembled itself without assistance. Cole had not been the free, available, beginning of something that Claire had believed him to be. He had been in an existing situation, one he'd apparently resolved in a very specific direction. And Claire had not been the direction he'd chosen. I drove home from Ben's that night thinking about her. And this is the part one want to be clear about. I did not feel glad. I did not feel vindicated or smug or like the universe had handed me a point on a scoreboard. I felt sad. Not for myself. For her. Because I knew what it felt like to have something collapse. I knew the particular sting of being wrong in a way that's visible. Of walking away from something real towards something that turned out to be a reflection. She'd burned 3 years. She'd said 7 cruel words. She'd blocked me everywhere with the systematic precision of someone cauterizing a wound. And she'd done all of it for someone who was going to say yes to someone else. I didn't want that for her. Whatever she'd done to me, I didn't want that for her. I went home that night. Sat on the couch with Biscuit. Looked around the apartment. My apartment, genuinely mine now, with the fresh paint and the rearranged furniture and the bookshelf I'd finally gotten around to. And I thought, I'm okay. Not in a triumphant way. Just in the simple, quiet, grounded way of someone who has done the work. I was okay. It came on a Saturday morning in January. For months after the door had clicked shut, I was in the middle of making a real breakfast. The kind you actually put effort into on slow weekends. Eggs and toast, and coffee that wasn't just functional, but actually good. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost set it aside. Then I saw the beginning of the message preview. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me." I knew before I finished reading the preview. I set the spatula down. I read it. All of it. The whole long, carefully considered, clearly rewritten several times message. She wrote, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I completely understand if you don't respond or if you delete this without finishing it. I needed to say some things, and I'm going to say them regardless of what happens after. I've been sitting with how things ended between us for a long time now, and I'm ashamed, not just of the situation, of the way I handled it. I was a coward. I'd been making a decision for months, and instead of being honest with you about it, I let you carry the confusion of a relationship that I had already mentally left. You didn't deserve that. I gave you 7 words and a block number after 3 years. That wasn't just unkind. It was wrong, and I've known it was wrong for a long time. I just wasn't ready to face it until recently. I told myself a story. I think I had to justify what I was doing. I convinced myself that the distance between us was your doing, that your calm was coldness, that your consistency was complacency, that because things had become routine, they had somehow become less real. I convinced myself that what I was chasing was something better. I know now how dishonest that story was. I don't know exactly what you know about what happened after I left, but things didn't unfold the way I imagined they would. And I'm not telling you that to make you feel sorry for me. I made my choices, and the consequences of those choices belong to me. I'm telling you because I need you to know that I understand now, in a way I refused to understand then, what I actually walked away from. You were good to me. You showed up in the ways that actually matter, not the performative ways, not the grand gesture ways, but in the daily, consistent, quiet ways that I mistook for not trying. You were stable when I needed it. You were kind when I didn't deserve it. You loved me in the unglamorous way that love actually looks like when it's real. And I framed all of that as failure. What I said to you that morning, I want you to know I've thought about those words a lot. They were designed to wound. And I deployed them because I needed to make myself brave enough to walk out. And the only way I knew how to do that was to make you the villain in a story you didn't belong in. That wasn't fair. That wasn't honest. And it wasn't true. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not writing this with any hope attached to it. I just needed you to know, from me, plainly, without defense, that I see it now. All of it. I hope you're well. You deserve to be. You always did. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the counter. I finished making breakfast. I ate it slowly. Thought about what I wanted to do. Here's the honest answer. Part of me had a response ready. Months of it. Months of things I hadn't said. The questions I'd never gotten to ask. The pain I'd managed privately without ever being able to express it to the person responsible for it. I could have laid all of that out. I could have pointed to every specific moment where I had reached and been dismissed. Every dinner I'd cooked and eaten alone. Every conversation she deflected. Every night I'd lain awake trying to figure out what was wrong with me when the answer had nothing to do with me. I could have mentioned Qley and the engagement and what it meant. I could have made her feel the full weight of the choice she made. I had every right to. But I sat with the message for 3 days. I reread it twice more. I thought about what I actually needed. And here's what I concluded. She had said what was true. Every word of it. The things she'd named, her own dishonesty, the unfair comparison, the cruelty of that exit line, the misreading of my consistency as failure. All of it was accurate. She had seen it. She had said it plainly. And what I discovered, sitting with her words for 3 days, was that I didn't need to add anything. Not because I'd forgiven her completely. Not because what she did was okay, but because the apology had confirmed the one thing I'd needed confirmed since September. That I hadn't been what she described. That the story she'd built to justify her exit, the story where I was the cold one, the insufficient one, the one who hadn't loved her enough, was a story, not the truth. She knew it. She'd always known it. And now she'd said so. That was enough. On day 3, I wrote a reply. Short. Because long replies in these moments are almost always for you. To make a point, to score something, to extract a final pound. I didn't need any of those things. I wrote, I appreciate you reaching out. I know this wasn't easy to write, and I can tell it was genuine. I'm not going to revisit everything. There's no point in that now, and I think you already know what you need to know. What you said is noted. What you understood, and what you admitted, matters more than you probably know. I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for. Not the version of it that's new and electric and temporary, but the real version. The one that stays. The one that chooses you back in the ordinary moments and not just the beginning ones. I'm okay. More than okay, honestly. Better than I've been in a long time. Take care of yourself. I sent it. Closed the thread. Put my phone back in my pocket. And went about my day. Winter moved into spring. The apartment became, completely, and without asterisk, mine. I'd stopped thinking of it as a place that had been something else. It was just where I lived, where I cooked, where I ran from each morning, where Biscuit supervised everything from his permanently claimed couch cushion Work was better. I'd taken on a project I'd been avoiding out of the distracted half-attention I'd been running on for most of the previous year, and it went well. Genuinely well. Ben got engaged to his girlfriend. She'd said yes at a restaurant. He'd told me about it over the phone at 11 at night, practically incoherent with happiness, and I'd laughed and told him I was unbelievably glad. I meant it. I was running 4 mornings a week by then, reading more than I had in years, sleeping properly, present in my own life in a way I hadn't quite been for longer than I'd realized. There's a version of what I lost that I still felt occasionally. Not for her exactly, but for the idea of what we'd been building. For the years. For the plans I'd made that had assumed a different future. That grief was real. It didn't require denying. But grief and growth aren't opposites. You can carry one while doing the other. That's the thing no one tells you. There is one more thing I want to tell you. About 2 months after I replied to her message, I was at Ben's engagement party, and his girlfriend's coworker was there. Her name was Audrey, and I want to be careful about how I tell this part, because this story isn't about a replacement. It isn't about proving something. It isn't about the universe handing me a reward for being patient or noble or whatever you want to call what I did. What I want to tell you about Audrey is this. The first thing I noticed wasn't how she looked. It was how present she was. Just actually there. In the conversation. In the room. Not performing herself. Not auditioning. Not angling. Just being. We ended up talking for 2 hours. Moved from the party into the backyard when the inside got too loud. Sat on the steps in the cold with drinks we barely touched. And talked about everything and nothing without once feeling like either of us was trying. At the end of the night she said, "I have to be honest, I don't usually do this, but would you want to get coffee sometime?" I looked at her. This person who had spent 2 hours being completely, uncomplicatedly herself. "Yeah," I said. "I'd really like that." We got coffee. And then again. And then many times after that. And here is what I discovered, slowly, quietly, without fanfare, with Audrey. The thing I had been missing wasn't excitement. Wasn't novelty. Wasn't the electric feeling of someone new deciding I was worth their time. What I'd been missing was ease. The kind of ease that isn't boring, it's the rare kind. The kind where you don't have to translate yourself. Where familiar doesn't feel like loss. Where the routine is something you both actually look forward to. Where you can sit in comfortable silence in a car and it doesn't carry any weight. Just 2 people who know each other well enough that silence doesn't require explanation. I hadn't known that was available to me. I'd been in something that required so much effort for so long that I'd confused effort with depth. It isn't the same thing. Here is what I want to leave you with. Not a lesson. Not a moral. Just what I understand now that I didn't then. The exit line she chose, "He treats me better than you ever did," was never about me. Not really. It was about her. It was the story she needed to build to walk through a door. If she'd left honestly, "I've developed feelings for someone else and I can't stay while those feelings exist, and I'm sorry," she'd have had to own the full weight of her choice. But if she could make me deficient, if she could leave because I had failed her, because I had been inadequate, because someone else had outperformed me, then she could carry the exit without the weight of culpability. She needed me to be the villain. Not because I was one, but because she couldn't leave comfortably without one. And people do that. Real, complicated, human people do that. They hurt you not out of cruelty, but out of self-protection. They build a version of you that justifies their own choices. And then they move through the door you've been made into. Understanding that isn't forgiveness. But it is something. Something quieter than anger. Something that lets you close the chapter without carrying it into the next one. As for Qley, I found out a little more eventually. Not through digging, but just through the passive osmosis of mutual social circles. He'd apparently been in an on and off long-term situation the entire time. The engagement was with her. Whether Claire had known any of this, I genuinely don't know. I believe she didn't. I believe she was sold the beginning of something and never knew there was a pre-existing story behind it. She'd built a comparison on sand. And when the wave came in, there was nothing there. That's the thing about someone offering you a beginning without telling you what came before it. It looks like a clean slate. It isn't. She said he treated her better than I ever did. She left believing that sentence. She walked out with it. For months later, she wrote 2 pages of reasons why it wasn't true. And I believe she meant every word of it. Not because I need her to regret it. Not because her regret validates me. But because the truth doesn't require witnesses to remain true. I was good to her. I was consistently, quietly, genuinely good to her. The story she built to leave was a story. And she knew it. She'd always known it. She just needed time, and consequence, to say so out loud. I don't know what she's doing now. I don't check. Not out of bitterness, just out of having my own life to pay attention to. My own morning runs. My own fresh painted walls. My own cat who has now claimed my side of the bed and shows absolutely no remorse. My own Audrey, sitting across from me at a kitchen table, stealing the last piece of toast and making no apology for it. My own story, the one that started with a door clicking shut and ended with space. Just space. Room that I filled with something that actually fit. She said he treated her better than I ever did. He got engaged to someone else. She apologized. I thanked her. And then I went and built a life she never could have imagined walking away from.